Basketball fans, Akil Augustine joined by Josh Cohen of the Orlando Magic. Josh, let's talk about your team so far. Fifth place in the Eastern Conference. A bit of a surprise to me. I don't know if that's the truth to you. Coming off of a big win in a shootout against the Indiana Pacers. Let's talk big picture now, where you think this Magic squad is in terms of their progression as a young team.
Well, they've been a phenomenal defensive team. They currently are tied with the Boston Celtics for the number one defensive rating. So that kind of just shows you where they're at defensively. They talked all about it during training camp and the preseason. They firmly believe that they're going to ultimately be one of the best defensive teams in the long run. They hold opponents to very few field goal attempts in general. So this is a team that really knows how to play a methodical, deliberate pace to make sure opponents aren't playing at their preferred pace. And they just get in their hands in the passing lanes. They cause deflections. They dive for loose balls. So they're very disciplined. They're very patient. And they execute extremely well defensively. So they're following the team's core principles. And we've seen them now shut down opponent after opponent after opponent. They had a really difficult schedule to start the year. They played the Lakers twice. They played Dallas. They played Indiana, like you mentioned. They played Chicago twice on the road. So they've played a number of really quality opponents, and opponents have had a really hard time cracking the defense. The Magic are great at smothering in the paint, crowding the paint, forcing opponents out to the perimeter. And that's pretty much been their main strength. You know, they do have some weaknesses offensively, but they are number 2 in field goal attempts within 5 feet of the basket. So they're really good at getting into the paint and drawing fouls. They're number 1 in the league in free throw attempts at the moment.
That's so wild for a team that's so young. You'd think that, you know, most young teams, they focus on the offensive end and the defense kind of comes and progresses later. So they're ahead of the timeline of that. Let's talk about some of that young core, especially Paolo and Franz. How have those guys been doing?
Yeah, it's been a little bit up and down offensively for both of them. Paolo has kind of shaken off a rough beginning. In fact, his last several games, he's been stellar. He had a really great game against Indiana in their last outing. He scored 24 in that game in limited minutes because none of the starters, except for Anthony Black, played in the fourth quarter because they had a huge lead. They led by 40 in the third quarter of that game. He also had a 30-point game and a game-winning shot against Utah. He made another game-winning shot against Chicago recently. So lately, Paolo has kind of stepped up his game. It's really his playmaking, though, that has been his number 1 strength outside of initiating contact and getting to the free throw line. So his range shooting still needs some work, but other than that, he's actually starting to pick up his play. Franz, from a percentage standpoint, you know, the numbers don't necessarily suggest that he's playing at a high level offensively, but again, the playmaking has been really good. He's starting to get back to being really comfortable finishing on drives. We all know that he's one of the best as far as getting to the basket using his footwork, very Manu Ginobili-esque at 6'9", 6'10". So he's starting to pick up his play as well. But both have been spectacular defensively. I mean, my personal opinion, pound for pound, and I know Jalen Suggs is in the conversation, I think Franz has been the team's overall best defender to this point. That might surprise some people because he's mostly known for his offensive skills.
All right, now let's talk about this in-season tournament. The Magic, kind of the quintessential type of team Adam Silver wants to get a lot of buy-in on this tournament. Not a lot of guys on some supermax deals, very young roster. So your thoughts on how these guys have approached it and how much buy-in do they have to this new concept?
Yeah, I think they bought in. You know, this is an opportunity for them, especially as a young team, to kind of show where they're at in their progression. You know, they know that this is more of a national stage. They know that more people will be tuning into these games. So I feel like it's an opportunity for all of them to show, like, you know, yes, you might think of us as underrated, but actually we're far ahead of the curve. And I think this in-season tournament, based on the fact that there's so much exposure being given to it, has given them that opportunity just to show that, you know, we're not just a young team, that this is a team that's taken the next step in their journey. And they've showed it so far in the in-season tournament and beyond.
So you've won a game, you've lost a game. Up next in the in-season tournament, the Toronto Raptors. Let's talk about that matchup. How do you see them kind of setting up things for the Raptors in terms of where the Raptors are at? Because, like, you got Scotty Barnes, a guy that Franz is familiar with, and Dennis Schroeder, and then Pascal Siakam. How do you handle that group?
Yeah, it's funny because on paper, a lot of people would say that the Magic and Raptors are kind of similar. Both long teams, defensive-oriented teams, really good at getting in the passing lanes, forcing turnovers. That's something the Magic excel at, something the Raptors excel at. So in some ways, there is a lot of commonality between the two teams. I feel like as far as the pace that the Magic like to play usually is a little bit more deliberate. They like to get deeper into the shot clock. They're a team that really forces opponents into tough shots deep into the shot clock. So from Toronto's perspective, they're probably going to want to pick up the pace a little bit to try to match what Orlando doesn't want to do. If Orlando can play at their preferred pace, it's going to be a tough matchup for Toronto, but vice versa. I feel like if the Raptors can get out and run a little bit, that can cause some havoc for the Magic.
All right, well, Josh, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it, and I guess hopefully we'll talk to you later this season.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Take care.